Welcome to the Heart of a Lake. Tonight's show is a blend of art and activism, of speech, song, dance, poetry, and people. On stage you will see Andrea Nann, Mark Matson, Gord Downie, and Tanis Rideout. In the audience, you will sit with fishermen, politicians, voters, workers, farmers, teachers, and neighbors. We come together out of concern and out of curiosity. For 5 years, Lake Ontario Waterkeeper has watched as cities and towns around this lake have struggled to make the connection between clean water and a good community. We have seen success, waterways restored and communities healed, and we have seen failures, environmental rights sacrificed, neighbors divided. 3 places, Durham, Port Hope, and Kingston Bath, now face decisions that will define our era. They should not face these decisions alone. Tonight, we come to you as people, a lawyer, a dancer, a musician, a poet. We come here as volunteers and as neighbors, excited, honored. It is our privilege to have your attention this evening. We hope to share with you a picture of Lake Ontario as you have never seen it before, a home for our families and friends, a source of wealth, a source of identity, vulnerable. We hope to share with you a sense of the spirit that waterkeepers witness every day, the spirit that compels parents and workers and artists to do what they can to win back some of what we have lost. This night is as much about a show as it is about people, you. We invite you to remain afterwards, to mingle, to chat, to get to know us better. Heart of a Lake is just a beginning. Thank you, and enjoy your evening by the lake. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your waterkeeper, Mark Matson.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the beginning of the Heart of the Lake tour. It was approximately 3 months ago when I came to look along Highway 2 for a number of places where we could do this tour. And we picked communities that were important because of the work of the volunteers across the lake who've been working on your behalf for clean water and strong communities. But also, we wanted to pick really great places where you could sit and enjoy the show. This was one of the first places we visited, and what a great place. It's an ex-courtroom and now a theater, which melds well with what we're trying to do here tonight. Bring both art and activism, environmental justice, and a celebration of sorts. The first thing I found out about this theater was that when it was a court, there was a trial going on, and somebody stood up in the top row there and started shouting out at the judge and accidentally fell and died, and has haunted this theater ever since. So if you see a specter go by later tonight, just remember he's been here for a long time, and he died for the cause that he saw. What is this from the activism side? We're going to have the artists come forward in about 20 minutes, but we thought we'd take a little bit of time to tell you a bit about Waterkeeper and what we do, and why these issues are so important to all of us. Durham, Oshawa, Ajax first. You know, there are a lot of people in this community who give thousands of hours of their time to really take on big players, people who are getting paid big salaries, people who work for industry with vested interests or work for government as regulators. And their efforts sometimes go unnoticed, and oftentimes they become frustrated, and many give up. They're also faced with lots of commercials which tell them everything's fine. They should just not worry their heads about these issues, leave it to the experts, leave it to the scientists. But the way our environmental law is written in this country, there's a huge component of it that depends upon an educated public, depends upon an active public, a public that cares about the purposes and protections of our environmental laws to safely swim, fish, and drink. And because of that, we thought, for sure, a big part of tonight is to thank them for those efforts and to affirm their commitment in the future. A bit of a story about myself, and I'm taking the opportunity tonight to do that. When my family first came to Lake Ontario in 1814, a great-great-great-great-grandfather from Ireland who came directly from the Battle of Waterloo, where he was fighting for Wellington as a drummer boy. After the victory, they came to Canada and moved to Kingston. With his pension, he had a family, and those children ended up becoming, very enamored with the Canadian political system, such that they all fought for William Lyon Mackenzie and the Upper Canada Rebellion, one of which was James Brophy, who ended up in Fort Henry, and one of only 3 people to ever escape. The story goes he ran off to the Wild Bill Circus and never returned. But his brother, William Brophy, who was my great-great-great-grandfather, purchased a piece of land on Wolf Island, which is a little island across from Kingston, and it's called Brophy's Point. And we drive when I was a child, there was no 401, and we'd drive down this highway, which I continually drive, and it becomes part of my home between Toronto and Kingston now. I'm fighting on these North Shores where the communities we're visiting are. And we'd drive down there, and it was there that I learned, really to swim. We drank the water, we fished, and we brought the fish home, we cleaned them and ate them, and we hung our fishing poles up in our living room and our lures from our rafters, and we dreamt every day of getting up in the morning and swimming again and fishing more, and we really understood that perspective that comes from those who live on the water, those maritime communities, those people with those long social and cultural roots who really believed that this was an important part of their life, and as children really informed all of us as to what we wanted to do with our lives. And it's 30 years later, and I can tell you, even on Brophy's Point, Eastern Lake Ontario, last summer, due to sewage discharges, the parents have to go out and check the shoreline for condoms, needles, and tampons before they let the children go swimming. The children are no longer encouraged to eat the fish. Much of that has to do with conservation and catch and release, which is a good thing, but I think a lot of it also has to do with our concerns, and our concerns about children and women who are hoping to have families eating the fish from Lake Ontario. Anybody who drank from that water now would be considered crazy, and Children's Aid might step in and take their children away from them. And I'm talking about a place that is luckier than most on Lake Ontario. I think the communities that we've chosen to visit, Kingston Harbour, Port Hope Harbour, and here in Oshawa Harbour, and even in Ajax and Whitby, you're not as lucky. You really wouldn't consider safely fishing, drinking, and swimming in those harbours, nor would they in Toronto Harbour, or Hamilton Harbour, St. Catharines. And it's interesting, as the waterkeeper working full-time on the lake, how we sort of interpret that and what we think really went wrong and how that happened. We don't necessarily, start pointing the fingers unnamed industry or regulators just to say that they've done a poor job. I mean, it's important. Lake Ontario has been an important industrial sector. There are many, many industries on Lake Ontario that need the cool water to cool their engines. We've got 3 huge cement kilns between Oshawa and Kingston. We have 2 nuclear facilities with 16 reactors. We have a number of chemical companies, auto industry, steel factories. Just between here and Kingston, where we're going on the tour, we've got about 18 sewage treatment systems. And of course, all the stormwater that washes off our roads and goes into our water. All of that contributing, all of it adding one onto another, so that you can't really point to any one place and say that's the problem. Or that, we'll just deal with this issue, and if we can win on this issue, it's over. Or if we lose on that one, we're finished. It's not that way. The lake really is 1,000 cuts are what are killing us. We've lost 60 to 70% of fish habitat on the lake. We've lost 85% of the fishery on the lake. We've lost thousands of days of swimmable beaches on the lake. We have 300 chemicals in our drinking water now. We have just an incredible list of concerns that all drive us to wonder, what is the point of environmental law and process? If they mean to safely fish, swim, and drink in our lake, and we can't, then what's the point of those rules? And also, what's the point of the processes? If every time there's an environmental process that comes forward and someone asks for the privilege to put a pipe into your air or your water, and you say to them, geez, I don't really agree with that point of view, I'd like to have that sort of debated in a fair and open, transparent process, something like a court, something where they have to actually bear the onus of proving what they're saying. They can be cross-examined, have to give full disclosure of what they're saying, and someone independent, a second opinion, makes a decision and holds the person who wants the privilege of putting that pipe in our air and water to the promises they made. If we ask for that, oftentimes now we're just told, well, you don't believe us? Leave it to the scientists. Don't worry about it. Environmental assessment, there hasn't been an environmental assessment process in the province since 1999 with a hearing. Federally, we get very few hearings. They're self-assessments or reviews where the industry and government meet and sort of present their package to us. I'm sure all of you are aware recently of the decision to build another nuclear reactor potentially on our lake, and the government passed a regulation that exempted it from a review so that we wouldn't even get the chance to ask for the review. And this, for all intents and purposes, sort of was a real quandary for me, who started as a criminal lawyer. I didn't go right into environmental law. I started as a criminal lawyer, and I couldn't understand what was going on. As a criminal lawyer, and I worked in the penitentiaries, and I worked in provincial prisons and the criminal courts, I knew that no matter what government, regulators, police chiefs, penitentiary guards, reputable people, no matter what they thought should be done, no matter what they thought was appropriate for the safety and security of the community, that ultimately, as a counsel, I could always ask for a second opinion. I was never accused of being an extremist, never accused of, you calling me a liar because I've said I want a trial and you have to get in the witness box. Never happened. And also, when communities started coming to me as an environmental lawyer and asking me, we've got this oil, these spills in our community, or this odor in our air, or this landfill that is leaking into our water and it's contaminating our fish, they'd say to me, well, I'm going to phone the ministry, the regulator, and they're going to do something about it. And I learned very quickly that's not the way environmental law works in this province or in this country. You need to put together reasonable probable grounds to believe an offense is being committed. You as a citizen have to go out and do the work of the police in order to get that file to the real ministry police type people, Environment Canada police type people. Otherwise, it just goes to abatement, and they inform public health, they inform the potential cause of the problem, or they inform the Ministry of Environment, they take the complaint, and they work to try and fix it before they get any more complaints. But they don't investigate it, they don't take evidence, they don't put together a brief, they don't go out and look at where it's coming from and tell the person, hey, you're going to have to go and tell the judge your story. I don't really care what you're telling me behind closed doors, how you're going to stop doing it. And that, the way they investigated things, the way they didn't enforce the rules, the way they didn't allow for second opinions from scientists and government representatives or industry representatives really made me see problem here. We were treating environmental justice as a lesser form of justice. We were treating it as sort of a luxury, something that we could do away with when we felt it was no longer appropriate, or, it's not that bad. We can't really see the damage that's being done from this one plant or that one plant or this one plant. And all along, it made me as an environmental lawyer feel like a second-class lawyer. No longer was I given the respect I was before. No longer did people think of it as an honorary profession to represent people and demand that justice be done and be seen to be done. And it really, now as the waterkeeper and the tradition of the waterkeepers, where we don't break the law, we enforce it, it really made it clear to me that the role of all of us in this room and the role of waterkeepers really needed to be to focus on our democratic rights and focus on those things that we know are already in the law. We don't need to make up new stuff, and we don't need to find new rules. What we need to do is respect and give integrity back to the rules and processes we already have in place. And this story goes on, and the three communities we've picked on this tour are all really indicative of that. The idea that somehow if you have contaminated landfills, the way you deal with the problem is move the people out and put up fences and reindustrialize it really doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me if you have 50 years of hazardous waste in a community that the government says, well, we've decided here's how much money you're going to get, such as in Port Hope, and take it or leave it. And if you rock the boat, then you might just lose out on the money that we're already offering you. Or in Kingston, where we've got a huge cement industry that really wants to switch fuels to a cheaper type of fuel, to import tires from 8 states and 2 provinces and burn garbage and plastic. And yet the public are being told the government's looked after it, there's no problem, and you have no seat at the table. And these communities, we need to all support the communities. Each one is a small, little group who are fighting really important big issues with people with deep pockets. And each fight, if lost, will define the fight for hundreds of communities that don't even know the fight is taking place. If the federal government can decide on the future of our local communities' harbor fronts and squash the vision of a clean waterfront, they can just not do it here. They'll do it everywhere. They'll set a precedent that they can point to and say, well, we did it there and here, and this is the way we do things. And if they can decide that hazardous waste sites, they can just throw a certain amount of money out and not have the community's involvement in terms of making sure that these terms and conditions and the provincial law apply, such as in Port Hope, and they can do that everywhere. There are thousands of hazardous waste sites in Canada that are known of leaking. And if they can decide that they want to burn whatever they want to burn, the privilege of burning it in local communities, such as in Bath, and the community doesn't have a say in it, well, there's 100 other proposals that are lined up to do the same thing. And so we need to exercise our democratic rights. We need to be heard. We need to speak up. And we need to recognize 3 things: that who owns your harbor? You own your harbor. And who will make sure that the air, soil, and water are clean? You will make sure your air, soil, and water are clean in your community, regardless of the name of the industry and regardless of who the regulators are. And who will make sure you get a fair process? Who will make sure that the community gets heard, whether it's a popular or unpopular decision or a big or small decision? You will. Because the law says that you have that right. As public concern, you can raise it and you can force government to give you a seat at the table and can ensure that there's environmental justice. You may not have all the answers. And you may not know, when you go to the bar later tonight to talk about an issue, and you've seen all these commercials that say every single thing is clean, 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 and then they turn to you and say, well, what's the problem? What's the alternative? You may not know that, but the least you can do, you can say for sure, is you want them to run through a form of scrutiny that the governments and Canadians use for every other decision, where we scrutinize the decisions by making them prove that it's safe, and any promises they make to ensure that there are terms and conditions that are in place, best available technology, monitoring, reporting, that those are put into law, and they get put into their certificates of approval and control orders. That's what we can do. And for those who think that this is all pie in the sky, I'd like to say this. I know that there are cynics, those who believe that what we do, doesn't make a lot of sense, that life isn't fair, due process costs too much, and nothing's ever going to change. and there are doubters. And those are the people who believe in what we're trying to do, but they think, we should really just leave it to the experts, and rocking the boat will only make things worse. But to both of those groups, I ask you to consider the other movements that have been successful in our society. Consider the labor movement in the 50s. And if workers thought that they couldn't make changes for minimum wages, for pensions, for fair hours of work, imagine if they listened to the cynics and said nothing ever changes, or that if they rocked the boat, things would only get worse. And look at the civil rights movement. Imagine if in the 60s, if those people who were fighting segregation thought that, hey, nothing's ever going to change. We're only going to make things worse. We should just leave it to government to decide our values. Those local preachers who won the civil rights movement and those local labor organizers who won the labor movement set a model for environmental groups, that it will be the grassroots movement that'll win back your rights to safely fish, drink, and swim in Lake Ontario. And we'll do it because we're going to use the laws, and we're going to look at the purposes and protections of those laws, and we're going to give them meaning and force back. Robert Kennedy once said that we will not make or interpret the law. We will enforce it without regional bias or political slant. And all the high rhetoric about noble mansions of the law and high-sounding speeches about liberty and justice are meaningless unless you and I breathe meaning and force into them. And that was Robert Kennedy Sr. in 1961 facing the Georgia bar on segregation in the schools. But his son, Robert Kennedy Jr., is our president. And I can say with all authority that he would say all the high rhetoric about green economies and high-sounding speeches about sustainability and environmental justice are meaningless unless you and I breathe meaning and force into them. And that's what we're here tonight to talk about. We can't protect what we have left. We can't accept the status quo. We have to win back what we lost. We can't safely fish, drink, and swim in Lake Ontario. Those laws were not there for the lawyers. They're not there for the government. They're not there for the industry. They're there for us. And if we can't, as a group, make sure that those promises and protections are kept, those laws will lose their meaning and force. And they won't just lose it for our generation. They'll lose it for the generations that follow. And so I'd like to, I know many people in this room, some are here for the entertainment and some are here for the activism. And I just want to say that, we've all suffered a lot on Lake Ontario, and we've all lost a lot of what everyone can tell stories about what they've lost. And I believe that, through suffering we learn. And as the Greek poet said, in our sleep pain, which cannot forget, falls drop by drop upon the heart, until against our will and in our despair comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. And for us as waterkeepers, that wisdom has been that we can win back the lake, that we can do it through democratic processes, and that we can give meaning and force back to our laws. And one of the people who I've learned most from, about and learned a lot of wisdom from, is the person I'd like to introduce now, and that's Larry Ladd from here in this community. Larry, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you, Mark, and as mentioned, I'm Larry Ladd, chair of the Oshawa Marine Users Group. I was born, raised, and educated in the industrial city of Oshawa. As a youth, I joined the Boy Scouts, where I was taught to appreciate the wonders of nature, our environment, camping, planting, trees, canoeing, etc. Growing up next to Oshawa Creek, polluted as it was my playground. In a rented boat, my dad took me fishing on Lake Ontario. Along with neighborhood buddies, we rode the shoreline, fishing first, second, and third marshes, and Darlington Park. I was an auto worker. I worked my way up the labor movement, serving in various elected executive positions with the Canadian Auto Workers Local 222 until my retirement 10 years ago. This is a great union with a wonderful moral, social, and environmental conscience. My wife Eileen and I live in Oshawa, where we raised 2 daughters. We are lifelong boating and sporting enthusiasts and promoters of waterfront recreation. From the early 80s, our boat was birthed at Oshawa Marina. In 2002, the Oshawa Harbour Commission, an entity of the federal government's Transport Canada, despite promises to the contrary, closed the Oshawa Marina from public use. The Oshawa Harbor Commission later evicted the Oshawa Yacht Club, effectively denying the residents of Oshawa access to their own lakefront. Enraged, the late Bill Todd and I approached the other boaters, and the Oshawa Marina Users Group was formed. I emerged as group chairman. We approached our federal Liberal member of Parliament, who arranged a meeting with the boaters and the Harbor Commission. Arising out of this was an offer to purchase the assets of the marina and a long-term lease of the water lots. With great enthusiasm, our marina family collected cash and pledges of over $100,000. At great expense, we had an offer to purchase and a 5-year business plan drawn up. Unfortunately, our offer was rejected. Our Member of Parliament refused to represent us and went further, publicly vilifying and dismissing us as a ragtag group of boaters. I believe he defeated himself for his failure to realize the connection between the waterfront and its people. Although Oshawa City Council supported our endeavors, and Councillor Nestor Pidrebecki has been a steadfast champion, the Harbor Commission voted to evict the members of the Oshawa Yacht Club. Last December, the Oshawa Harbor Commission had Canadian National Rail to construct a railway spur line to the harbor. The marina users contacted Lake Ontario Waterkeeper for assistance, and I appeared before the City of Oshawa Waterfront Coordinating Committee. The city responded by requesting community involvement. Lake Ontario Waterkeeper, marina users, Local 222, both the active and retired membership swung into action, as did the City of Oshawa. We prepared written submissions opposing the spur line. What happened next is unbelievable. The Greater Oshawa Chamber of Commerce supported the Harbor Commission and wanted a hearty slice of Lakeview Park to build residential housing and move the baseball diamonds to the closed marine area. The Chamber emphatically stated it was in favor of the rail spur proposal and would increase the heavy industrialization of the waterfront. In the early days of our battle, we introduced ourselves to Lake Ontario Waterkeeper, Mark Matson and Kristen Tully, Vice President, who just happens to have grown up in Oshawa. We are grateful for their support. The marina users in Lake Ontario Waterkeeper want a waterfront that is environmentally clean and friendly, now and for future generations. It must be safe and secure for people and wildlife. We need a full-service marina with a public boat launch ramp, a fully functioning Oshawa Yacht Club, green space, and waterfront trails connecting Lakeview Park to the historic Second Marsh, with a mix of residential and light commercial property on the surrounding harbor lands. This plan will once again allow our residents access to their waterfront. The Oshawa Marina Users Group is proud to be a part of the first leg of the Heart of the Lake Tour. We will continue to fight to win back what we have lost, and proudly join with the people of Port Hope and Bath in strengthening the ties of our Lake Ontario communities. To the performing artists in tonight's show, a sincere thank you. And to the audience, remember November 13th is Municipal Voting Day. Clean air and clean water build strong communities. It's time to dissolve the federal government's Oshawa Harbor Commission. Simply put, it's time to take back our waterfront. Oshawa's waterfront, marina, and harbor must be owned, operated, and administered by the Corporation of the City of Oshawa in a partnership with the federal government. I sure like the sign, "Welcome to Oshawa on the Lake." And if you haven't seen it, please see Gord Vickers. To my spouse and family, it hasn't been easy with the lawsuits and the precious time taken away from you. Thank you for your love and support. I would like to introduce some individuals with us tonight, and I would ask the audience to let them all stand, and at the end, let's give them their applause. Frank Rare, co-chair Marina Users Group and Commodore of the Oshawa Yacht Club, and his spouse Sharon. Boots and Gary Hood, Marina Users, entertainer and provider of the sound system for our meetings. Bob Crozier, Marina User, retired from the Ontario Provincial Police. He's a great friend who keeps me on the straight and narrow. David Smith, a great friend and helper of the Marina Users. He's a retired Senior Projects Manager, Provincial Environment Ministry. Mr. Pibberbecki, Oshawa Ward 3 incumbent Regional and City Councillor. He's a Marina User superb friend and supporter. Dave Renault, CAW Local 222 Environmental Representative and President of Durham Regional Environmental Council. And I have a number of other people: Lanny Joseph, Dave Thompson, John Henry, Lynn Ree McCarthy, and Mr. Welcome to Oshawa on the Lake, Gord Vickers, all candidates for Oshawa Council. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Mayor John Gray, who's here tonight. I can't see out there for the bright light. And I hope that Mayor Steve Parrish from Ajax is also present. I also want to say to the reporters and announcer of the media, press, TV, radio, we know you'll do your best to bring us fair and balanced coverage. And to you, the audience, and to our supporters in and around our communities who couldn't obtain tickets to come to this sold-out show, on behalf of the Marina Users Group, a sincere thank you. Enjoy the show.
Thank you, Larry. Now, returning to the show, and I get to introduce someone who I can't really remember how long I've known him, but it's been a long time. He, like myself, is a resident of, or was a resident of Eastern Lake, Ontario. He became one of this country's greatest poets, songwriters, has entertained millions of people, and rightfully deserves his reputation as a celebrity in this country. However, his involvement with Lake Ontario Waterkeepers has nothing really to do with his celebrity, so much as to do with Gord's commitment to the issues we work on. Gord has been an incredible student of the issues. He continually amazes me the way he's able to put our issues into common language, to represent the people really in a very ordinary way, with incredibly extraordinary language. He's a great friend, supporter, and I know also would consider him, for me anyways, I consider him one of the great environmental activists on the lake and in this country. And with that, if I could ask my friend and our host for the Heart of the Lake Tour, Gord Downie, to join the stage.
Thank you, Larry. How you doing?
Thank you, Gord.
It's my first time in a courthouse. I saw you running with your friends I called your name too loud, come back so many times. It might have been embarrassing if you hadn't come walking back. Here's where I shook you by the shoulders, shoved you up against a truck. What's up? It was a picture of someone getting older and of someone growing up. Someone growing up. Someone growing up. Someone growing up. Someone's growing up. It was like you was in disguise. You were so nonchalant, come on, as though your well half-lidded eyes said, what the hell do you want? Well, I must have said something for you to feel I was alright, alright, 'cause we had a great conversation that went on well into the night. 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 Heart of a lake, dark and cold, shot with light, fortune untold. Welcome everyone. Tonight we are welcoming everyone. Lawyers, politicians, journalists, bureaucrats, sailors, storytellers, affidavit writers, fishermen, activists, mothers, interveners, swimmers, scientists, poets, painters, hunters, water skiers, cliff divers, scuba divers, songwriters, wreck hunters, longshoremen, dancers, dock workers, lakers, cottagers, islanders, lifeguards, rowers, skaters, ferrymen, wave riders, wakeboarders, birders, surfers, canoeists, remediators, lobbyists, and a lighthouse keeper with no lighthouse. Welcome everyone. We're all members of the lake community, a community that stretches from one end of this lake to another. We're all here for the same reason, and that's to honor those who have worked so hard and come so far. We're here to proclaim our commitment to the biological, economic, and cultural heart of our region. We are here not to bury the lake, but to dig it out, look for its heart, to find it and win it back. You know my name is Figment. I am what I think I am. All of my heroes are women, and all of them are cinnamon. My cinnamon women. Ba-ba. Sanding down a grudge uncollected has left a pile of puzzle dust. Me cake drunk in the middle, crying And what could never happen to us is happening to us. But long as we're talking in drift nets, there's a rotation afoot. All the things we can come up with will still be surprisingly put above. As long as this road lacks perspective, as long as we swim, 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 as long as we hold hands in the swiftness of all three dimensions, long as we're talking in drift nets, there's a rotation afoot. All the things we can come up with will still be surprisingly put. Will still be surprisingly put. Will still be surprisingly put. Very good friend told me when thinking about tonight to rely on the things that you've seen and done. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming. We're obviously all here for the same reason, because the lake belongs to us, to everyone in this room. It's in the public trust for us to enjoy and protect. The lake is ours. It is our heritage, our birthright. It's our heart and soul. It is a symbol of our health and prosperity. It holds our past and our culture. It doesn't change, and it only changes. We all used to live by it, swim in it, pull fish from it, sail on it. We've all skated on it or thrown a rock into it with a curse or a wish. Remembering that the lake is ours is to be a kid again. It is to know your world and be close to your surroundings. As kids, none of us thought the lake was too far gone. And none of us here tonight believes the lake is irreparably polluted. We know there's hope because the kid in us tells us so. And how do we forget these things anyway? And why do we need reminding? Well, it's easy. Beach closures, fish consumption warnings, drinking water advisories, waterfronts cut off, chain link barriers, pharmaceuticals in human sewage, shrinking, disappearing wetlands, 300 toxic contaminants, industrial manifest destiny. When our access to the lake is limited or cut off, we start to forget. We forget our natural assets, our history, our future. We forget our rights. We forget we even had them. As an adult, it's easy to forget what the kid in us remembers, because he relies on the things he's seen and done. This is called the 11th fret, mostly because it takes place on the 11th fret of the guitar. We're still doing all right? Everyone's all right? Yeah. This is fucking off by degrees, and suppose we turn out to be not quite Hawaii, but I can float back to sleep, 'cause at least you're lying to me like music that dances from glowing apartments as shadows entwine into a creamy darkness like jewelry hung down from rich silhouettes, portraits on the sidewalk where windows reflects all the colors of evening and the onset of lights like the promise of nothing, sweet nothing tonight. This is an acting ecstasy, and I suppose we turned out to be bathroom graffiti, but I can float back to sleep, 'cause at least you're lying to me like shoveling hope into the infinite us as the world surges in, yelling this is a drug bust. Might turn up the heat and make us into one person, but then the temperature plunges and the predicament worsens till we're a fleck of new snow on the eyelash of a cow till we melt away, melt away, melt away now.
Damp and mostly water, we almost drown in ancestral memory of skin like scales, the peripheral flicker of floating shadows. Remembrance just submerged skims the surface, breathes deep with wet lungs grown from gills and grace. Bodies reminiscent of shorelines, perfectly aligned and made for each other. We learned the lessons of eons fished deep, quenched our thirst with the lake cupped in our palms. We've memorized its moods, the play of wind across its face, and sheltered in the green pines reflected. Eased into recreation on boardwalks, in bathing costumes, the Sunday stroll of parasols, bodies arced on beaches. These are our rhythms on the lake. We live here in nuclear shadows, the decay of colder war and half-lives, remembrance cowering under desks in pinafores and penny loafers. Lay claim to the stories on this lake, the aquatic murmur of what's past, of what is yet to come. I grew up with acid rain coloring contests, elementary school nightmares of my skin sloughing off in weeping rivulets under fallen skies, the lake a gravitational weight outside my window. Grown on islands, the damp of beaches moldering too much tobacco in my lungs, swept impotent in eddies, the pull of tides and currents, the alchemy of shorelines where substance alters and solidity becomes something more slippery. My life is dotted by islands, an archipelago chain linking me to histories in the rain-worn grooves of deadfall. Drowned friendships capsized, too far from the shore for salvaging. These days, I tiptoe to the edge, sniff at chemical scents on the breeze, warning signs, the vacant sound of no one splashing in beach shallows. I yearn for submersion, to be paced by the wet pleasure of the lake outside my door. I am evaporating, lying here. We are drawn onward to edges, the night sky's quicksilver reflection falling fathoms to look deep for the heart of the lake. A way to mark this, lost in the perpetual motion of seiches and swells to map the center. Navigate these rivered veins pulsing with meltwater currents awash in the torrent of seasons, our own erosion. Flinch before this bleed out, the scabbing scars of concrete contusions, memory paved, bullied smooth. Weight our desire and sink it down in the detritus of industry, the mythology of shipwrecks, stories we were once told. Try to find the exact moment where the lake ends, a seamless sea change that seeps in to each of us. We curl into midnights to gather on these shores, winters with our feet bladed, the scrape and spark of metal on ice, frozen bottles at our lips, or slipping naked into 4 a.m., August water a shared garment to clothe us. Trace the scent of water on my marooned flesh, a newborn's baptism to cleanse what's past. Landlocked here, by ownership, cut off by spurs and shipping lanes, we long for reflection to plumb the depths of what is ours. Now there's surging urgency, a tidal shift that we invoke. We stand on the edge to watch it recede and rewrite this narrative, a way to read our reclamation, seize moments on the shoreline, whisper in the sibilant language of water, with the rhythm of a mariner's heart. Alteration is in the speaking. Uneasily gauge the distance, the desire for transference, the need for change to be someone else, somewhere else. Contemplate the crossing of straits and practical measures of isolation, of fever sheds and solitude. We come here to this, ports of hope, ankle deep, waving from the shore. Step to these gathering places, name them as a birthright, strung like beads on northern shores. The slow deposits of our histories await our movement. Keep our future for the choosing. We're no longer just watchmen here. Chart a course, raise an armada from ports and kingstowns. Washed ashore, marooned on shoals, we toss out messages in bottles. Brook no more covert condescension in the backroom deals of progress. Instead, we lay claim to process, to what always has been, shared and absolute. This is our watershed.
Tell me no, please tell me no, put it out of your mind, please. If I put it out of my mind, then will you tell me? She was always like that, even as a kid, quiet and apologetic, silent like a deer. He yells at her up until she goes pale, then resumes his job as a painter, painting all them fire hydrants yellow within a certain framework. She wouldn't always feel so good all the time, but over the course of the day she'd forget. The dancer in her run amok she'd forget. And from the forest edge, he'd come. And returning home's not to be construed with anything resembling a tender mood. Just stay in my orbit, though it's lacking certain latitude. But then it goes late. The bin-ar and going of another day's bobbled and caught. And she says nice things to go to sleep, like Charles Comfort and Mimico Creek. The nocturnal shush of the saboteur is whispering there's nothing counterfeit about the summer. It took big waves of discipline to learn to pump birdsong in. She was always like that. Even now, watching tonight's complement of bloodsuckers, she's trying to be silent. When catching a bug in mid-flight might be easier. I have a secret, tell me no. Please tell me no. Put it out of your mind, please. If I put it out of my mind, then will you tell me? She was always like that. She was always like that. She was always like that. I am a retired teacher and homemaker, 76 years old. I actively work with 3 local environmental, non-governmental organizations and have been active on nuclear issues since the late 1970s. Since this time, I have worked approximately 20 hours a week on these issues. I traveled from Port Hope to attend this hearing. It was 1 a.m. on February 24th when I finally presented my oral submissions. I was cut off from my presentation after 10 minutes. I believe the commissioners had become fatigued and non-attentive. They had become very short with interveners. I felt frustrated because I had spent many hours preparing my presentation, traveling to Ottawa, only to have my participation made meaningless. Despite my attempts to engage the commissioners, the staff, and the industry representatives, I was disengaged. I was not permitted to ask questions of the commissioners, nor the staff, nor the industry representatives, nor did the commissioners, staff, or industry representatives ask questions of me. There was no opportunity for cross-examination, and all evidence is presented not under oath. As a result, interveners have no meaningful opportunity to test industry submissions. Because of lack of intervener funding, none of my groups have been able to retain counsel, and all travel, hotel, and gas expenses have been paid personally by me for each of my attendances. I believe that the hearing process is disrespectful of intervener participation. Through rules and procedures, interveners are effectively discouraged from participation. My future participation in hearings has become unlikely as I've become too tired and too frustrated to continue to participate. I feel that all my time and energy writing and presenting submissions has been wasted, and I have been discouraged. remember you there on your cell phone, surrounded by your friends, eyes flickering, you're trying to cover a smile in your hands. Is it someone for us? Someone more worry-free, someone who can say, leave the worrying about him to me, Josephine. I remember you there in the last rays of light at diplomacy's end, eyes flickering, you're crying, but isn't this when the crimes began? When the people you want to don't, the people who do, you don't believe, do you, Josephine? Some horns. Surrounded by all the day's plans, eyes flickering, you're trying to let a coffee cup warm your hands. Baby, we're born lost, we're born to persevere, but honey, I'd walk into your painting until I reappear as a speck of comet tail dust, or a blue-green northern light flickering just in your eyes' deepest ravines. Good night, Josephine. Good night, Josephine. Good night, good night, good night, good night, good night. Good night, Josephine. Josephine. Thanks a lot. I pulled a little funny thing out of a book by William McDonough and Michael Braungart called Cradle to Cradle. It's a good book to get. Anyway, in it there's one little heading called A Brief History of the Industrial Revolution. And at the beginning of that, they asked the reader to imagine being given the assignment of designing the Industrial Revolution retrospectively with respect to its negative consequences. The assignment would have to read like this: design a system of production that puts billions of pounds of toxic material into the air, water, and soil every year, produces some materials so dangerous they will require constant vigilance by future generations, a system of production that results in gigantic amounts of waste, puts valuable materials in holes all over the planet where they can never be retrieved, requires thousands of complex regulations, not to keep people and natural systems safe, but rather to keep them from being poisoned too quickly, measures productivity by how few people are working, creates prosperity by digging up or cutting down natural resources and then burying them or burning them, erodes the diversity of species and cultural practices. They go on to say, of course, the industrialists, engineers, inventors, and other minds behind the Industrial Revolution never intended such consequences. In fact, the Industrial Revolution as a whole was not really designed. It took place gradually as industrialists, engineers, and designers tried to solve problems and take immediate advantage of what they considered to be opportunities in an unprecedented period of massive and rapid change. Like I told you, it was funny. You could read. Just gotta teach myself this one, alright? You could read, you could think, you could have sex, you could leave your jewelry in a bowl beside the bed. Look out the window, down the lawn, to the lake, for as long as it takes. Maybe it's the things we don't say. Maybe it's the things we don't say. Maybe it's the things we don't say. Maybe love is the new maybe. I know what winter's about, too many nights, not enough days. I've watched the birds fly south, and no, I don't wave, 'cause the last words out of my mouth were stay and out of my way. I'm in the wrong place. Maybe it's the things we don't say. Maybe it's the things we don't say. Maybe it's the things we don't say. Maybe love is the new maybe. Maybe love is the new maybe. 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 Maybe.
At this point, I'm sure some of you are beginning to wonder if there's some great significance to this sequence of movement that I've chosen to repeat over and over and over again. I like to think of it as kind of a tribute to all of us in the form of a cheer for our hosts tonight. Oh, ache. On. Terror. per 100 milliliters. Or maybe perspective. Or possibly persuasion. But perhaps I should be moving on. When I was a girl, I could simply close my eyes and dream a lovely dream. I was so shy. I would hide beneath my mother's skirt. Only peering out periodically. In my innocence, I had no need to speak out. Jung said, unfortunately, there can be no doubt that man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. He also said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. There can be no transformations from darkness to light, from apathy to movement, without emotion.
I could try and describe this as coordinates, compass points, the quick step of contour lines, slip into these karst cave holes in our memory of moments that occurred here and here. But a forest of metaphors only obscures the trees. So lie down here, belly spoon to dull stone spine, the collected, seductive sedation of sediments, and the glacial creep disrobing, drawing back the softer stone than this, and feel the slow inch of time along our bodies, along this land we cup, chin in hand and stare. And it's like watching, progress like looking back in time along compulsive pioneer lines that give no concession to the lay of the land, but run headlong to headlands of myths and iconography. We crash into this and conjure stories like rainbows in cascade mist. Track these Indian braves on hunts, the silent romance of paddles dipping true love into glacier lakes. Coastlines shaped with repercussion, of daredevils tripping the wire fantastic, genteel mustached reflection of our own delicate act of balance that we hold here and here. Of the crushed tool of honeymooners in heart-shaped hot tubs, or the safety net overlooks of teenage makeout spots hidden from plain suburban eyes. Come here to see the chosen land. We'll bury our prophets in consecrated grounds, unprofaned by newborn captains of industry. Sip our health from orchids with names like jazz time cocktails. Waltz to woodpecker staccato. Enrapture ourselves in fossilized crevasses, and at last collapse to crest's caress.
Tomorrow. Oshawa and Montgomery Creeks meet, and we look through the chain link at the Harbor Commission's majesty. We saw a man trespassing, struggling with what looked like a 30-pound salmon. Hey Larry, 30 pounds? I didn't know it was a salmon. Larry did, from about 400 feet away. We saw 5 or 6 of the 30 or so apparently trespassing cats who now inhabit the premises. And strangely, they're all exactly the same size. We stood on the contamination. We saw where the marina used to be. We saw where the waste is, where it was moved to. We saw where the proposed rail spur would go. We saw what suspended rights look like, and it ain't pretty. It actually looked kind of bleak. And yet there was something in the bend of that fishing rod that looked like progress to me. It looked like hope, and it looked like the whole city fighting hard to make this area safe and accessible for everyone. So for that reason, it looked like choice. And you deserve nothing less. You're good people, and thanks for coming out. And thanks for our day by your evening and your lake, and I know we'll never forget it. I give the last word, well, my last word to Thoreau, and in wildness is the preservation of the world. If I ask you a question, are you gonna lie to me? Honey, is that your question? 'Cause that one was easy. It's gripping the city and hitting the town. Pretending might end, but pretend can pretend to end, that's right. You can't pretend, yes I can, yes I can, yes I can. You can't pretend, yes I can, yes I can, yes I can. Can't pretend. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
said, this was just the beginning of the Heart of the Lake tour, and it's true. And tonight, I think we wanted to leave a little bit of time after the show here to go into the lobby afterwards and take any questions. We're hopeful that people see this as a beginning and sign up and become members or get the little tour t-shirt about knowing your rights. I want to take this last chance here to thank some pretty amazing people. Of course, Larry, thanks a lot for standing up here and being an ambassador for the community. The light's a little lower. I can see Peter Madsen, who's been a big sponsor of the tour of the song. Whereas, of course, I didn't give much of an introduction to, but Andrea Nann and I first met at the last Boston Bruin Toronto Maple Leaf game that we went to at the Old Gardens, and she's an incredible person, an amazing artist, as I'm sure you can attest, and I'd really like to hear a hand for Andrea for being here. Introduced and said all I can about Gord, but I think it's true that Gord Downie, thank you very much for your time and your support for everything we do. My great friend Tanis Rideout. Tanis, we've been anointed as the Poet Laureate for Lake Ontario. And that's all original work she did for tonight, and she's an incredible person, and she will always be on anything we do on this lake. So thank you, Tanis. Of course, Ann Bourne for the music that Andrea danced to. I'd just like to thank her for that great instrumental. Kristen Tully, who's the the heart and soul of this tour, and making everything happen, and the Vice President and Jennifer Mondo, and all the help from everyone else. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the
Madsen,